Welcome back to the Intelligent Builder podcast sponsored by Plutus Agents. Today, I'm joined by Robert Platt, the principal of Habitations, an Atlanta-based residential design firm. Robert has spent nearly 5 decades around residential design and construction with experience on both the design side and the building side. And he's got a lot to say about how the industry has changed over the years, especially where it's improved, where it's gotten tougher, and where homeowners are sort of losing leverage in the process. So, Robert, it's great to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. So building has really always been in the family for you, right? It was your father and your grandfather. So you kind of grew up around it. But when did you realize that was a path that you wanted to take?
It's hard to say. There were so many things that were decisive, but my dad was just a very inventive guy. He was a great businessman. I think you and I spoke earlier. He had a sixth grade education, just a brilliant guy. And he just knew how to do many, many things and came from a family that, they built, they farmed, farming family, big farming family. The family that didn't farm were builders. It was just the way it was. And I remember as when I was young watching my dad drafting. He had a drafting set up at our dining room table, and he'd draft, and he did these beautiful color renderings in colored pencil. I had no idea he had such a gift. I had no idea that he was so talented, and it just fascinated me. And then, of course, he told me I could never touch his tools. And so as soon as he left, I touched his tools, and messed with the stuff. And it just, the bug bit me. And not only in drafting, and I started doing that when I was young in seventh grade. Florida had an incredible drafting and engineering, architecture and engineering drafting program. I did that for 6 years from seventh grade through my senior year in high school before I went to University of Florida. And in the meantime, Dad, when I was 12 years old, we built a house for my aunt, and he threw me up on the roof and said, "You're going to learn how to roof." And so I roofed, and I started roofing at 12. And so I was learning to draw and design, and I was learning how to build and work with my hands. And it was just that way forever. And he desperately wanted me to be a lawyer, and it didn't work out that way. I just love construction. It's the only industry where, if I'm having a bad day, I can drive around the city and I can point to things and say, I did that. I created that. I designed that. There's a family in there that's enjoying their life around something I was able to do for them. So it's very rewarding, very fulfilling.
Yeah, that aspect of it is actually really cool. I never really thought of that side of things. But that's great. You grew up with it. So it was really in your blood to get into the industry eventually. And then
Pretty much.
in our last conversation too, you said early on one of your mentors taught you that design isn't just pretty drawings, right? You have to be able to communicate on how something actually gets built. So how much did that lesson really shape the way you operate now?
I'd say for me, it shaped about everything. Hesitate to say people's names on the air, but this man was a great man. His name was George Bull. George Bull Jr. He was a terrific architect in Atlantic Beach and in Jacksonville. And George was what we call a nuts and bolts guy. He was a great designer. He did beautiful designs. He was very contemporary, and he liked contemporary architecture, and I love contemporary architecture. Maybe I got that from him. But he always said designing something beautiful is one thing, but somebody has to build it. So you need to know how it goes together in detail, because you're trying to explain that to other people. That's what drawings are. That's what plans are. They're a language. And it's the language of construction. And it's how we tell people to do something that's never been done before, because every single project is brand new. So, he balanced me. You've got the creative side, which is fabulous, but you have to have the nuts and bolts side. You've got to have a little engineer in you and a little architect, and it's got to come together if you're going to be good at this.
Yeah, so when you went off on your own, you started in just the design aspects, right? But then you kind of grew into building as well. So what was that shift like? What was the reason you chose to really dive into the building side?
Well, I guess cynicism. You draft and you design, and you put these drawings together, and the client's thrilled, and you give them to the client. And back then, we gave them to the client in the residential world, and they just went out, and they had a builder, they had somebody they liked or somebody they talked to. And invariably, from the beginning to the end, the builder would have a lot of influence or convince the owner to start changing things, and not necessarily for the good. And as I get older, it's very different. But I just reached a place, quite frankly, that I got sick and tired of people not building what I designed the way I designed it, because I'd worked very hard and the client had said, yes, I like this. And it's like, well, if you like this, don't let somebody dissuade you, move you in another direction. So I said, what the hell? I'm going to go out and become a builder. And I did. I became a contractor in Florida and started building.
I can see how that's very frustrating, especially when you're designing it in a proper way and they change things, and if it's not for the better, that's just it doesn't look good on you either. So you ended up with this kind of rare perspective where you live both sides of it, right? And I think that's what makes your view of the industry super, super interesting. So I want to dive more deeper into the industry side of things, because you got nearly 5 decades of experience. When you look at residential construction today versus when you first got in, what feels the most different to you?
Boy, it's hard to articulate. Over the years, over the decades that I've been doing this, I started out in an industry that was very staid in how it did things. And a lot of people think that's bad. You get stuck in a rut. Not necessarily. This is a very complex industry. Just as an example, statistically, the average house has over 4,000 components. That's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that you're putting together, and they're all assembled differently every single time. So it's a very complicated thing. So a system was in place for a very long time that basically works like this, and it worked well. Liken it to a football game. I'm the coach. I design the game plays. I look at what we're trying to do. I assess the field, and I put together a program to address that site, that condition at that time. The builder is the quarterback. They're the ones in the field. They have to be able to read the plan, read the play, and execute the play properly and connect the dots because they're putting a lot of things together. And it sounds kind of crass, and it's not this way. George used to say, you don't want a builder to think. It's not a matter that you don't trust the builder. They've got enough stuff on their mind doing what they do, organizing, scheduling, finding the right skilled people, verifying that the people are practicing their craft appropriately and applying it, as designed. So they have enough to do. Don't make them do your job. Make sure that you answer all the questions in the drawings. But then comes the building inspectors, and you've heard about these guys. Everybody complains about them, oh, they just want your tax money, blah, blah, blah. And that's, I don't know what I can say here. It's BS. I'm sorry. I'm in construction, and being able to speak without dropping an F-bomb is kind of tough. We try to be good, right? But the fact of the matter is the inspectors are trying to make sure that minimum safety requirements are being met, minimum structural requirements are being met. We've got to remember when we talk about building to code, code is a euphemism for minimum. If you went to a doctor, right, and your doctor said, Owen, don't you worry, buddy. I'm going to do the minimum I can to fix your problem. You're going to look for another doctor. But a builder says,
Absolutely.
don't you worry. I build expressly to code. Well, hell yeah, they do. They should. It's the minimum standard. That's what code is. So code makes sure that everybody is playing by the playbook and doing things that are safe. Call it a three-legged stool. The coach, quarterback, the referee. Take any one of those legs out, the stool falls over. And it worked that way brilliantly for not only decades, even centuries. And we're generally referred to as specifiers. We're the guys that help determine what technology, what pieces, what stuff should be applied to the design, right? Not being trendy, but what works well. Now, to answer your question, I can actually get there, believe it or not. What happens now is marketing has taken over. It started in the late 80s. I was guilty of it in Florida. Design build. You've heard that, that phrase, design builders. Design build is it really started in commercial construction, and it was designed because commercial projects are huge. They're expensive. They take very long periods of time. Some take 2-3 years. So to cut down on the cost of interest carry, the amount, because they got to pay interest on the money as they're pulling it down, we came up with something called design build. And that was architecture firms that had construction divisions that could design, for example, all the foundation work. And then before the next phase is designed, they're actually starting the construction on the foundation. And that saves a tremendous amount of time. Somehow that bled into residential, and it got into, uh, one-stop shopping. Let me tell you what that does to the consumer. This is not a good thing. This is one of the things that has started the deviation from the course. Up until then, we would design, then we take that design and we put it out to bid to usually three competent contractors, depending on where you're at, because some states to be a contractor, pickup truck and a business card and you're a contractor. Other states like Florida, for example, where I came from, very, very rigid uh, criteria for becoming a builder. It's a tough test. Back then, it was 3 days, 8 hours a day, very low first time passing ratio, probably the leading cause of alcoholism in America. It was a very tough test. It was really bad, you know. So, at any rate, these bids that we put out to these contractors allowed the owner to have the competitive advantage. Who was going to come back? They could evaluate their skill set. They could evaluate how they interpreted the plans, how confident they were. Had they done this kind of construction before? And generally, they didn't pick the lowest bidder. Usually, people pick the person in the middle. And that is a good thing. Now, when you go with a design build contract, their mission, and it's business. I mean, really, we got to keep things straight, but it's purely business. The idea is I'm going to get your attention up. I'm going to hold on to you. I'm going to bring you in. We're going to become engaged in design. And then what are you going to do? You're going to take a design that you've built with me and you're going to say, well, thanks for the help, but I'm going to go look for somebody else. Generally doesn't work that way. It's very awkward. And the problem is this, as a designer, my responsibility, I am an advocate for my client. So if you come to me, Owen, and you're my client, my job is to look out for your best interest, your health, safety, and welfare, best interest of spending your money, and achieving the mission that you're trying to achieve. If there is a dispute between you and the builder, I'm your advocate. If we go to court, you can call me and I can say, no, they did or they didn't follow the plans. They did or they didn't do as you asked. You know, I can help you with that. If I work for the builder, because let's face it, about 1 in 10 of these builders is a design builder. 9 of them hire somebody like me independently, and they bury the cost in the construction, and somehow it feels like it's free, which I'll never I'll never be less amazed at the gullibility of Americans. There is no free lunch. It's not like there's a bunch of designers sitting around going, "Man, I just love this so much, I do it for nothing. I will do it for the builder because I just do it for the love of the craft." No, it doesn't work that way. I got a wife that throw me out a balcony, right? So, that being said, the builder is going to influence you, the consumer, to their strengths. And it's not because they're bad people. It's business. But if you have a really skilled builder, they're going to have a broader range of capacity, a broader range of capabilities. A less skilled builder, I remember the first time I put a steel beam in a house with one particular builder, and builders aren't used to steel because you can't cut a steel beam with a circular saw, right? So I put a steel beam in there. This guy had a coronary. Can't you use wood? Well, if I could have used wood, I would have, but I couldn't. I needed to use steel because of the size and all the stuff. I needed to conceal it and hide it and all that crap. It was tough, but he just had a coronary over the steel. Go to another builder and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've done that 100 times. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it." And we just move on because a more skilled person didn't have an issue with it. So as a consumer, you are confining yourself to a third party's range, capabilities, maybe even the products they make the best margins on. They're going to lean you towards things that are easier for them. And I could go in ad nauseum of things that, a lot of builders do that are theoretically to cut cost. No, it's to cut their cost, not necessarily to cut cost. So builders are good people. Most builders are excellent, but you've got a few that do spoil the barrel. But the fact is, when you've got this three-legged stool and you keep things segregated properly and keep people in their lane, so to speak, doing what they're supposed to do, the consumer has the greatest number of protections. And that's the most important thing.
I really like your response to that question. I asked a very broad question, and then you were able to really touch on all the points that I wanted to talk about today too, which is awesome. I like the way you brought it back too. I really like the football analogy. That makes a lot of sense. The builder being the quarterback. You need to make a very straightforward process for them because you're right, they have a lot going on. So the the better design and sort of instructions you could provide, the better the outcome will be. But you started to touch on clients, your clients and just customers in general. Where do you think that consumers really lose leverage now in the, I guess, design build process? What are maybe some red flags early on to look out for as a consumer?
Well, right out of the gate, the first problem is, and it's not the consumer's fault. It's the consumer's, for lack of a better phrase, inexperience in the industry. Consumers don't know. You know, I think you and I chatted before. There's two things about a house. One is getting it. That's pretty hard. But the thing we never see is the really hard part, keeping it. Keeping a house is a hell of a lot harder than getting it. We have all kinds of programs to get a house. We lower interest rates. We'll do all kinds of first time buyer programs, blah, blah, blah. But all houses age, all houses deal with weather and elements and all that crap. So how the house is built, the materials that are used, all the things that happen. And the reason I bring this up in response to your question, one of the challenges, and this is nobody's fault, this is just the nature of man, right? Technology is just jetting by. Man, it is rocketing by us. Like I said, I grew up in Florida. I remember the Apollo. I was a space freak, went to all the Apollo launches. They were incredible. We hadn't been flying that long when we went to the moon. We'd been flying about 50 years. It's like, wow. And we were going to the moon. And then, right now we've got the first manned crew in 50 years coming back from the moon. Technology is just rocking forward. It's kind of amazing. We talk about cell phones. There is more computing power in this than there was in all of the computers at Houston when the Apollo missions launched. This has greater computing power than the entire room they were in. You've seen pictures of them in movies with all the consoles and 30 engineers in there. Yeah, I'm holding that in my hand. I'm holding 10 times that in my hand. Imagine that
Crazy to think about.
in a house. We've got high cost of energy. We've got energy systems now. We've got air conditioning systems. There are so many. You hear these phrases bopping around, mini splits. I mean, what the hell is that? It sounds like a gymnastics move, right? We got mini splits. We've got tankless water heaters. We've got solar energy. We've got LED lighting. We've got motion sensors. I could go on and on and on, and it's one of the consumer's head just doesn't explode trying to keep up with this stuff. And the problem is that's what code's doing. Code is trying to keep up with all of these consistent, rapid, constant, nonstop advances in energy and technologies, and they're not. It's virtually impossible to keep up. Code just keeps shifting. Every year we get big shifts in code, things that we have to change in our design and how we draft, how we put the plans out. The consumer can't keep up with this. And so what are the red flags? Now when a consumer goes online and they're just throwing it out there, trying to, where do I start? So they key in home renovation. My God, bot grabs that, reroutes them, sends them directly to builders. Suddenly all of these pretty pictures come up, builders' websites that are just gorgeous, pictures of houses that are just fabulous and well manicured, and they're stunning. And people get wowed by shiny things. They see the shiny things and they just wig out, right? They get trapped by shiny things and they're drawn to websites. Well, a website, number one, does not in any way tell you the true qualifications of the owner of that site, that builder. You got to do some homework. You got to do some research. If this is a big expense, buying the house, if you're buying a house, costs a lot of money. On a good day, it's expensive. If you're renovating, you damn sure better have somebody that knows how to modify an existing structure without breaking it. It's very complicated. What in a beautiful website tells you that this person knows? You need to do the boring stuff, the stuff that isn't pretty pictures. You need to go to Better Business Bureau. You need to look and see if they've had any lawsuits brought against them. You need to check with the Secretary of State. You need to do some damn homework. You got to act like it matters. This is your money. Are you going to spend? I've got builders now, and this is kind of pathetic. Most of my builders will not touch a project under 100,000. Won't even look at it. Now here in Metro Atlanta, construction costs are very high. They're very high, and it's not necessarily the builder's fault. There's a lot of that's another podcast altogether, and maybe one day and I'll get into that crap. But it's a real mess. So, and frankly, the bulk of my builders won't touch a project under 150. It's funny, we just had a project we were working on. It came in at 85,000. The owner had a stroke because it's just a screen room. And it was 85 grand to build this screen room. It's a nice little screen room, but it's nothing that flashy. I thought the cost was ridiculously high. But when it came in at 85, the builder who came up with the cost said, "Man, I'm sorry, I just can't even build this." And he withdrew. And we've had to go find a whole new group of guys that can do these quote small projects. And I'm sorry, when $85,000 is small, I don't think it's small to you. I don't think 85 grand small to anybody. It's,
Nope.
this is kind of where we're at. So what are the red flags of the consumer? It's not necessarily red flags. It's the consumer must assume the mantle of their future. They've got to act in their own best interest. They got to dig in. They've got to do boring stuff. They have to do research. They have to look at who they are. When you're looking at, it's like stars. That's one thing that drives me crazy. They've got 5 stars. Hell, you can buy 5 stars. Getting stars, getting ratings is easy. It's easy to find all the people that think you're wonderful and just not put up the people that think you suck. And I've
Yeah.
got clients that would like to slit my throat. Everybody gets a bad client. When I go and I look at anything that I'm going to engage, any professional, I go directly to their 1-star ratings. I don't go to their 5-star ratings. I go directly to their 1-star ratings. Now, why? Because you can find out fast. It's just like a movie. When you go to a 1-star rating, are they just stupid? Was it just some ass that was spoiled and was just, I wouldn't want them as a client. They were just stupid. They wanted, everybody wants $5 worth of stuff for $4. I mean, of course, right? So were they just angry that they didn't get their way? Trust me, we got lots of clients that way. We hear all these lists about good builders and bad builders and Angie's List and blah, blah, blah. Truth be known, is there a list anywhere of bad clients? I've had some clients that are horrible and I have to be very careful, but they're just awful people to work with. They're awful people to work with. They're unrealistic. They they want more than they have, and they expect you to make up the difference. So, what I tell the client is you have no one to blame but yourself. You need to go in, you need to do the research, you need to find out, even with a designer, who are you hiring? What do they know how to do? Talk to them, get some information from them. And the best referrals you can get are direct referrals, other clients, you know, other client. Most of my business, thank God, comes from referrals. Clients say, we worked with them. They pay attention. They listen. We work on the axiom. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? I'm sorry. Somebody keeps calling. You got two ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you speak. Pay attention to the client. And so we get a lot of clients that they refer us just because we heard them. We paid attention. And the next thing is everybody's a designer. Everybody's a designer. Every homeowner fancies design. Who doesn't slow down when there's a job site? Everybody likes to rubberneck and slow down. Ooh, what's that? What's going on? And what are they doing? It's interesting. Right? Have you ever seen the game Tetris?
Yeah, yeah. It's an old
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Everybody likes Tetris. They like to put rooms together and they think that's design. Putting rooms together so they fit like a puzzle. No, that ain't how it works. So when you go to a builder or a designer, quit telling them how to do it and tell them what you want it to do. For the consumer, get a better handle. You're hiring a designer because they design. If I went to my CPA and told him how to do my books, he'd just kick me out the door. They're a CPA. The fact of the matter is, when you go to a designer, a builder, or whoever, know what you're hiring them for and quit coming in and trying to tell them how to do their job and tell them what you want to accomplish. And so that's what I tell consumers.
Actually, that last point you made is really good because when you're hiring a professional, or I'll even use the example of when you're speaking to AI, like a ChatGPT or a Claude or whatever, you want to give it the outcome because it knows things, right? When you're talking to a professional designer, you want to give the outcome because then it will figure out everything in between to get you that outcome. So that's a really great point to make. What about when a customer or a consumer comes to you with they're super excited about a lot of stuff that they did some minimal research and they want all these crazy things. How do you guide them through a process without crushing their vision?
It's not easy. Generally speaking, our rule of thumb, and we tell this to clients. We have these little speeches we give clients, and they're pretty direct. One is, I'm going to give you my best advice twice. If you insist on going the direction that I think you shouldn't, no problem. I will do it. But you'll know 2 times I told you, don't do that. There's an old comedy routine. I can't remember what it was, vaudeville. Doc, it hurts when I do this. Doctor's prescription, don't do that. It's people come to us and for example, fads. Fads are bad. Down here in Atlanta, I don't know where you're at. Here in Atlanta, we had this sudden surge in the last couple of years. Why? I don't know. Brick houses painted white with black windows. It's
Mm.
this heavy contrast look. And the first couple of thousand times, it was beautiful. It's a big city, so you could. But now when you see 3 in a row on the same street, it's like, oh, for God's sake, people, get some imagination. You don't want to do that. We've got a thing. Another prime example is, especially with younger clients, we'll say, because we do predominantly major renovation design. And people want to open up floor plans and make kitchens and living rooms all open. And that's very cool. We get it because the social dynamic of the family and friends has changed. People like to cook and everybody likes to be in there with them while they're cooking, right? So we like to open these plans up. So we'll ask clients, we think, or we'll tell them, hang on to your dining room, because they'll say, oh, no, we're going to take the dining room, we're going to turn it into this. No, don't do that. First and foremost, we have a running joke. The house you're going to die in, you know, the, like I'm building my house right now. I'm an old fart. It's where my wife and I are probably going to die. We don't plan on doing that anytime soon, so we're not getting up a group, right? We're just letting you know. But and our running joke is, it's our mausoleum. We're building our mausoleum. And we tell clients, if this is your last house, we're going to help you build your mausoleum. If it's your mausoleum, hell, build it the way you want, because it's not going to much matter. Once you're gone, and let the estate have it. They're going to have a great time. You know, you design around what you want. So you can get quirky as you want. But until then, if I was talking to a client your age, I'm going to say, let's get it to function the way you want, but don't throw things out. You may not give a damn about a dining room. Yeah, well, we don't have family over at Thanksgiving and all that crap anymore. We don't do that sort of thing. Keep it, because you may have an opportunity that moves you to another town. You get a great, career boost. You sell that house, it needs to be sellable. You need to keep it marketable. And the people coming in may want a dining room. So we tell them, start thinking about your dining room in terms of it being a multi-purpose room. It can be a dining room. It can be a den. It can be a media room. It can be something else, but don't get rid of it. So that kind of thing. Two other things, like, there was a big wave of drawer type microwaves. I don't know if you've seen them.
I have not. I can't even think of how that
It's pretty
works.
cool.
Just a
They're
microwave in a
microwaves. They
drawer?
go in the base cabinets. They don't go in the overhead cabinet. They go in the lower cabinets. And instead of having a door, they have drawer. You pull out a drawer and you set your stuff in the drawer and you close it, and it's a microwave in a base cabinet. They're really cool. People went nuts over them. Here's the problem. Soup sloshes. So when you open the drawer, you put the soup in, you close the drawer, it
Well,
sloshes. You wind up making a mess. And so we tell people, be careful. Drawer microwaves are really cool, but you're going to slop your soup. And people go, oh, there's lots of things like that. There's lots of things that are, everything's got its positive points. Everything has its negative points. And I would say, one of my biggest things for the consumer is, quite frankly, their job is to sell you all the good points and make you look the other way on all the negative points. So think about that. Think about everything you're putting in. The nice thing about coming to a designer is, I've had 1,000 clients that have done all kinds of stuff. A lot of stuff that we thought at the time was a good idea. And I run into them 10 years later and they say, you know, it just didn't work out. We wish we hadn't done that thing. And now I've got 5 decades of things that work and things that don't work, and why. Because we have to remember that, what we're designing, our house, it is the atmosphere you live in. It's where you raise your family. It's where you come up with brilliant ideas. It's where you entertain yourself. It's your solace. It's a lot of different things. And above all, it's your little piece of equity in America. All I can say is, seek out professionals, be thoughtful, pay attention, do homework, and don't be lazy. If you let other people think for you, you're going to get exactly what they want.
that is really, really great advice. There's a lot of little things you need to think about. I never, especially with that microwave thing, like as soon as you mentioned that, I was like, oh, that's super cool. I would love to have that. but then with the soup. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many little things you got to think of.
It's just little stuff. And
Yeah.
it's all in a house. It's how we move. And, I'm having to look at the possibility. Well, I don't know, people can see me, I want oxygen, but I'm employed full time. I'm an active person. I have portable oxygen. I get out, I do things, I go to job sites, but I have to work around this. And when I design my house, I have to work around this. I'm at a place where we're designing our house for ADA. What if we wind up in wheelchairs? Are we gonna have to move? Are we gonna have to have people come in? No, I'm designing now. I'm getting doors the right sizes. I'm getting hallways a little wider. I'm taking care of things to make the house far more compatible with my future. So, we actually, when we bring a client in, we have a survey that's 48 questions, 49 questions, and it puts a lot of people off because it's hard. My feeling is that's our first test. If you get lazy filling out that, you're not going to go far in the process. You're going to have a tough time because it gets worse. We experience with clients on every job, it's called decision fatigue. People have no idea how many decisions they have to make, and they just get disgusted with it. They get over it. And our job is to prop them up and keep them moving and tell them, it's not going to be this bad forever. And then finally, we tell people, we get a lot of people that look at things and go, well, we're going to do it in phases. We're going to do this phase one. And then in a few years, we're going to do phase two. And, that's going to help us save some money. No, it's not. It's going to do two things. Number one, in phase one, you're going to find out how horrible it is. It's not a great experience. Everything takes longer. Everything's expensive. You got a ton of decisions. In the end, it's magnificent, but getting there sucks. And it's like I tell people, being the Christian, I don't worry about being dead. What I worry about is getting dead. Getting dead sucks. I don't want to go through the process of getting dead. I just like to pop up on the other side and be done with this thing, right? So same thing holds true with the house. When we get to the end and we move in, yeehaw, life is great. But in the interim, it sucks. It's dusty, it's dirty, it's dangerous. Sometimes things are delayed in delivery. Craftsmen get sick and can't show up. There's delays on the job. Inspections don't happen on time, bad weather. I mean, yada, yada, yada. You do that, phase two, you're going to put off until you're dead. You're going to get halfway there, get phase one done, and that's it. I'm never going to do that again. So our advice to people is tear off the Band-Aid, get her done. Do what you can do, step in, lean into it, bite down on a bullet and go. It will be over, one of these days.
Yeah, no, it's a very thought intensive process and a long process too. The thing you mentioned about planning and building your own, mausoleum, that's actually my grandparents, they bought a house in Florida maybe 10 years ago, and they planned around that surprisingly. One floor, right? And then my grandfather had a stroke 2 years later, and now he's in a wheelchair. But because they were thinking long term like that, there's really no issues. He can be
Yeah,
mobile around the house.
right.
So you're right. That survey is probably very, very helpful to think long term like that. But I do want to ask you one more question. I know we're almost at the, 40-minute mark, but so the work in the industry is now more complex. There's codes, the talent pipeline is pretty thin. There's obviously some issues with confused or maybe less educated consumers in the process, right? But when you're looking ahead, so after nearly 5 decades of experience, what do you think the industry needs most right now in the next, we'll say, 12 months or 1 to 2 years?
The biggest problem we've got right now is skilled labor shortage. The shortage of skilled labor is epic. It's been estimated between 2 and 4 million. That's a big deal. And we're not talking general labor, we're talking about skilled labor, people that know how to do things. Unfortunately, crafts like carpentry are something that usually were handed down through generations. Carpentry isn't just sawing wood and nailing boards together. There's a lot more to it. Something I enjoy about renovation is we work on old homes. And you work on a home from the 1920s, late 1800s. It's remarkable how well built they are. And it's more remarkable they're still standing. The house I'm renovating to move into is 120 years old. And it's amazing because back then a carpenter was a very skilled craftsperson and they did everything by hand. They didn't have power tools. It was remarkable. And nails were expensive. So every nail was placed specifically, and they had a helper because when they dropped a nail, they didn't say, "Oh, yeah, let it go." They told the helper, "Pick that up," because it's expensive, you know. And so it was a different mindset. Now that has gone away, and we've got a huge gap because of pay. So the answer to your question, in my opinion, is two parts. The wage scale of skilled labor must be lifted. And yeah, that means more money. But if we don't do it, young people are not going to come into the industry and pick up the crafts. And the industry is going to continue to suffer. So we have this huge shortage of labor. And it's so, profound. It's like I tell clients, they come in and say, they'll come in November. We get a big rush usually in the holiday season because everybody's trying to get their stuff ready for spring. They want to have their design ready in spring. First of all, getting a design ready, a simple design takes 3 months. You don't just poop them out the door. It happens. It's a complicated thing. At least around here, we have a very complex set of drawings we have to do. So it takes time to do that. And you want to dot your I, cross your T's, make sure you accomplished everything the client is setting out to do. Then you got to put it out for bid. People put it out for bid, and builders will walk around and talk with their hands and say, "Oh yeah, we've done 3 or 4 like this, and you should expect $250,000." How the hell do they know? You have to bid from a set of documents, a set of drawings that says this is exactly what you're doing. So a real competitive bid usually takes 4 to 6 weeks because the builder wants to come see the job, wants to talk to his subcontractors, he wants to visit the site, he wants to look at conditions, he wants to look at access. So that takes a long time. So now we're looking at 3 months for the design ish, sometimes longer. We're looking at the bid process, 4 to 8 weeks. Then we got to get a permit. That doesn't happen overnight. Renovation construction, 2 to 3 weeks. New construction, 2 to 3 months. Really tough. The point I'm driving at is you come to me in November and say, "Yeah, we're ready to build. We want to break ground first of the year." Oh, you may want to. The bandwidth of the building industry is gone. They've already taken on all the jobs they're going to start in spring. And the other thing is, why does nobody build in winter? Not necessarily because it's so cold. I mean, up north, of course, but because the days are short. I got 6 hours or 7 hours of sunlight versus spring going into summer when I got 8 to 12 hours of sunlight or more. So how long can the crews stay on the job site? How long will local ordinance allow them to stay out and work? So what I'm saying is, design this year to build next year. You don't design this year. You design this spring to build next spring. Now, if you want to break ground in the winter, that's cool. But plan on this being a year project. It's going to be a year to design it, put it out for quote, get a builder nailed down, get into their bandwidth, and get on the job because they don't have the people. So coming back full circle, the biggest thing, we need people in the industry. And the industry is trying. They're starting schools for carpentry and plumbing and HVAC, but you don't crank these people out in 6 weeks. It takes years. I went to school, God knows, like 6 years of education to do what I do, and I didn't learn squat. 20 years later, that's when I can say I learned something because I've learned from doing it. And my daughter is working with me. She's got a master's in architecture, but she'll tell you she's learned more working with me, working on real projects and working in the field than she ever learned in school. So, they're going to be able to lay a good foundation, but it's going to take, if we start now, and the industry's trying, we're looking at 5 or 6 years before we start rebuilding the coffers of people. And I will close it with, we need to embrace other methods of building. We need to look at modular construction like Europe does. I was doing modular construction in the Middle East in the late 1970s. And now in the 2000s, we look at modular construction like it's new and, something new and flashy. No, it's not. It's been in Europe and Asia for decades. Panelized construction, same thing. Building everything on the job site is not going to work anymore. We need to start doing things in factory environments now, more. So,
Yeah,
and we can
that
go
was
on for
actually,
2 days, but you're looking at a clock and I'm watching you.
yeah, no, I was just, I was just thinking we could talk for so long. There's so many things, especially on the skilled trade side. That's a very real and big issue. I'm actually meeting with a plumber very soon, which is why I was looking at the
Cool.
clock. He is, he's been trying to sell, but he needs people, and he's been looking for
Yeah.
people for like 2 to 3 years. I mean, he's got a small crew, maybe I believe it's 4 guys, but he just can't find the
Yeah.
good people to work. So it's
And
definitely a
actually,
real issue, and
plumbing
it's
code
it's something that needs to start now.
plumbing codes have gotten really tough because we've got all kinds of new stuff. And when I say new stuff, you wouldn't believe when a washing machine empties, dude, it shoots a lot of water out under pressure very fast. If you don't have it plumbed right, it'll back up in the house in a heartbeat. So these
Hmm.
new machines have caused changes in the plumbing code. These guys trying to find people that know, that have passed the test, that have, done their apprenticeships and whatnot. Yeah, I feel for the guy.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually one of my recent guests, I believe I'll be posting her podcast probably next week, but she wants to do a whole educational segment for the consumer, and one of them is about plumbing. So on that whole side of things, all the different changes that have been going on, and just what to
Absolutely.
know as a homeowner. But we will close out here though. Thank you, Robert. This has been seriously great, very amazing. I love how candid you are about everything. You know, the good, the bad, and where you think the industry should be heading soon, especially everything about the homeowners and just seriously educating them for the last, 45 minutes is super awesome. But before we do close out though, is there anywhere people should find you or connect with you? Maybe to chat, an active LinkedIn or Instagram, something like that?
I am on LinkedIn, and I unfortunately don't use it as much as I should, but I'm on LinkedIn. It's Robert W. Platt, and Habitations LLC is my company. Or go on the website, habitationsllc.com is my website. And they can reach me there. And we love to talk to people. We love to help people. We love what we do. We love what we do.
Yeah, I'll link some information below so people can find you. But for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to The Intelligent Builder. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to share it with another builder, founder, or contractor in your circle, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Robert.
Be well.